This is my office, which is also a rather busy place. We have a pile of clothes that somebody just bought for us. We distribute clothing here in the wintertime and backpacks and things to people, street people. And we also take food parcels of non-perishables and things and just distribute them to people who are on the street. People bring things and distribute them. I want to say something about one or two things in this office, though. There's a nice picture of my grandfather back there on the wall, who was part of the Kralska Garda, the King's Guard in the Serbian military. He was decorated with the highest awards of the Serbian, or the Yugoslav nation for his exploits on at the Battle of the Vardar River. He was a volunteer who went back to fight in the First World War against the Germans and the Bulgarians in that war. My grandfather was a great deal of the shaping of my formation. But this horse is interesting, this model. It's has, I think, a rather interesting story. The largest park in Richmond, British Columbia is named Minoru. It's named after this horse. And it was originally a racetrack. But Minoru never saw Canada. He was owned by King Edward and won the first national derby in Britain, the Royal Derby, for King Edward. And afterwards he was purchased by some very wealthy Russians in what's today Belarus for breeding purposes. And whilst he was there on this farm, the Russian Civil War broke out following the revolution. And General Denikin confiscated or took over anyway all the horses for use in the White Army cavalry. And Minoru was part of that group of horses pressed into the cavalry use. And after he ended up in the Crimea, when the White Army were evacuating, and he was the only horse that was evacuated together with the White Army. And it happens that Metropolitan Anthony Khrapovitsky was on the same ship with Minoru. And Metropolitan Anthony, of course, is one of the primary formations in my own theological thinking. And Minoru ended up in Constantinople. Now, when the racetrack was built in Richmond, Minoru was very famous at the time because he just won the Derby for King Edward, who was our king as well. And so the racetrack was named Minoru. And now a Russian, a close acquaintance of mine, who's a sculptor of great renown in North America, was commissioned earlier this year to do a full life-sized statue of the horse Minoru. And he invited me down for the unveiling. And at the unveiling, there was a door prize of this model from which the big statue was made. And it just so happens that I had the winning number and won the model at the draw. So I'm very fond of it because even though it's rather vague and remote, the connection with the White Army and the connection with being on the same ship that Vladika Anthony was finally evacuated from the Crimea on board. And so I'm very pleased to have Minoru. He's sort of a semi-Russian horse. So, and a veteran of the White Army, a veteran of the Russian Civil War. So, yeah. Also, this particular rock, and I'm going to ask Andrew to just hold it for a moment so he can see the intense weight of it. It weighs a great deal more than it should for its size, and of course, as you can see, it has these fossils in it. I got this a few thousand feet up in the mountain years and years ago. I'm told that it's about 100 million years old. I think it's probably older than that, maybe 200 or 300 million years old. But the fossils in it, and it's one of my prizes, because as you know, most of my studies were in physics, and I'm interested in all things scientific. But this rock is one of the prizes of my collection. I want to explain also this particular picture on the wall. of course, you recognize the cave paintings, but this painting which someone did of the DNA inside the great church of Constantinople. And in both cases, the painter was telling, in both cases, this is the language of God. The architecture of the church also reveals something about our Lord Jesus Christ and God. And of course, the DNA of life is a language of God. And that God speaks to creation itself. But the Orthodox Church, when we have the proper Byzantine architecture, you notice that the entire church rises and moves toward the icon of the Pantocrator, the one who governs all things, sometimes falsely called the Christ the Judge. It isn't. The hymn that goes with that is, O Christ, the Word, the wisdom and power of God that creates and sustains all things. So the Byzantine-style church rises up, and it gets its unity, its form, and its strength when you look at the architecture, all focused on that icon of Jesus Christ as the Word, the power, the Word and power of God that creates and sustains all things. That's, I think, the third earmost of the canon of the Dormition. We chant that hymn, and the third Catabasia, rather, in it. And anyway, I like it very much because in church the language of worship is the language of man speaking to God, and the DNA is the language of God speaking to man, to the creation. And I had a couple of geneticists who actually converted to Orthodoxy because they told me that they realized in dealing with genetics they were dealing with the language of God. And they were brought to it. The others are the Pleiades, which are mentioned in the book of Jeremiah, and this one.
What is that?
It's a constellation of the sisters, the four sisters, and in Jeremiah it refers to the gentle influence of the Pleiades in it, and of course one of the nebula, in this case the Spider Nebula, and anyway, this is my office, and it's where a lot of marriage counseling and discussions and talk goes on, and where occasionally I actually get to sit in here and do some of my work, but usually we're someplace else. Okay.